We want to continue with our discussion on governance, and today we want to look at models of governance. We can recall that previously we looked at what governance is. We also looked at the various levels of governance. We also traced governance over the years from ancient times to present time, and we looked at various characteristics of each stage and some of the drivers of governance then and now. We also looked at elements of governance. We have also indeed had a discussion on the role of government in governance. So today we want to look at the various models that have been adopted by various governments and organizations in their effort to implement and execute frameworks that they have put in their place to govern the organizations that they work or that they manage. So our focus today is an understanding of models of governance. The discussion will center on three principal areas. First, we want to understand what is meant by governance models. We shall then embark on a discussion on each of these models, focusing on what they are, their strengths, as well as their weaknesses. We begin by understanding of what is meant by model. A governance model is simply a mechanism that has been put in place by governments and organizations to enable them to translate governance frameworks into practices and procedures. In other words, every organization or government have frameworks on how they want to run organizations or how they want to run government agencies. But you must find a way on how you translate whatever you want to do into actual practices and procedures that then need to guide the organization and need to be followed on a day-to-day basis. So when we talk of model, we simply mean the mechanisms that government organizations have put in place to enable them transform frameworks that they have in place into practices and procedures. The model, therefore, is understood as a mechanism that organizations use to make decisions and to undertake procedures, and also clarify the roles and responsibilities of duty bearers. In particular, it is clear that every agency has particular functions for which it was established to perform. Within every organization, there are departments. These departments are manned by individuals. These individuals are assigned specific responsibilities that they discharge on a daily basis. And together, this is what contributes to the performance of the organization. So there have to be mechanisms that ensure that individuals that have been assigned these roles and responsibilities are playing their part. But again, the models also explain the roles and responsibilities of service recipients. This is because it is important for organizations to understand that they have a duty to provide services, but service recipients too need to understand that they also have rights and obligations within the framework of consuming the services that are being provided by the duty bearers. What then exactly are their roles and responsibilities? This again is what governance models provide. For this reason, therefore, it is important for organizations to have very strong models. And a strong model of governance has certain components, which are structure, oversight responsibilities, culture, and infrastructure. Today, we will not look into these components, but we shall look at them in our later discussions. The first model that we want to understand and discuss is what we call the hierarchical model. Hierarchical model is also called the traditional model. Tradition in the sense that it is among the first models to emerge, and this model is characterized by what we call the top-down structure. That is, authority flows from up downward. We have top-level personnel, middle-level personnel, and the lower-level personnel, and there are clear chains of command, clear communication structure, clear instructions that flow from the top to the bottom. This type of governance model is largely found with appointed office holders. For instance, government agencies. Operation is we have what they call accounting officers. These officers, they bear the greatest responsibility in terms of what happens within their dockets, and they are meant to supervise activities and operations that are below them. When things fail, they're required to take responsibility. Otherwise, they're the most authoritative, the most powerful, and their power and authority flows downwards. Their work is to ensure that they oversight individuals and officers below them to ensure that governance standards are adhered to and are enforced at all times. This hierarchical model, it relies on top-level decision makers. These decision makers, they come up with policies, and these policies are now implemented by individuals that are below them. And this is necessary so as to ensure uniformity, rapid mobilization, and accountability across governmental or organizational units. A hierarchical model has certain strengths, which I also want us to pay attention to. One of them is that there is clear lines of responsibility and accountability. This is because decision makers are quite clear. Where authority and responsibility lies is quite clear. And because of this, it is clear to trace where exactly things have worked or where things have not worked. Again, decision making is quite efficient because top level managers, they're the ones that make decisions, and then those decisions come down to middle level managers who now break them into smaller units, which are then implemented by the lower or line managers. And because of this, there is possibility of standards that have been set by the organization or governmental agencies to be fully adhered to because of strict oversight that comes from the top level managers. The other important strength of this type of a hierarchical model is that there are clearly defined policies, and these policies explains what needs to be done, who needs to do them, when they need to be done, and how performance is assessed. Because of this, if properly implemented, then a hierarchical model has a high potential of promoting transparency. And because of this, again, there is greater emphasis on ethical policies. That is, work ethics is quite emphasized, and therefore there is need for this to be done. And when such is done, there is high chances that, again, this can help in mitigating potential misconduct that normally occur in organizations. Again, it is highly effective for rapid mobilization, decision making, and implementing widespread policies. Because decision making is centralized, it is easier within a hierarchical model for decisions to be made much easier because the lines of consultations are few, and therefore decisions can be made easily in a single meeting, and then they are given in form of instructions to lower level managers for purposes of implementation. But this model also has certain weaknesses. One of the most important weaknesses is that it hinders flexibility. and it also leads to micromanagement of operations, because sometimes it is difficult for lower level managers to be innovative and to come up with new methods of work. This is because of the fact that they have to wait for instructions and approvals from top level managers. Since any deviation that does not meet the concurrence of top level managers can easily be subjected to punishment. Again, the success of a hierarchical model requires very strong oversight capabilities, because lower level managers fear that they cannot act on their own, and therefore they have to wait for instructions from above. There's a possibility that when they are faced with challenges or with issues that do not fall within the rules and policies, it is difficult for them to act, since they have to wait for authority from the main decision makers. Again, strict hierarchies also create communication barriers, or it might restrict public participation in governance. This is because top level managers, they feel that they have the authority, they have the power, and they also believe that should things go wrong, then they stand to be punished or be blamed. On that basis, therefore, they are likely to act knowing that they have the power and knowing that they will take responsibility for anything that happens. Because of that, there is sometimes a tendency for such managers to make decisions without seeking the opinions and concurrence of lower level managers. And that's in that sense, therefore, this one can stifle public participation, which we know is one of the most important elements of good governance. Again, the rigid vertical flow of information can stifle local initiatives and innovative solutions. Sometimes you want to do things in a way that you think is the best way to do so. But like I noted earlier, in a hierarchical model, authority rests with the top level managers. And therefore, there's a possibility that even when you have good ideas that you think can be implemented, then you still have to wait for authority from top level managers. And in doing so, this kind of model, it kills innovativeness, because you still have to wait for top level managers. It is also important to mention that sometimes if top level managers do not approve of any innovation, they're likely to kill it. And in doing so, this one can also stand a chance to discourage lower level managers from thinking out of the box and therefore doing things in a better way. The other important model that I want us to look at is what we call the collaborative model. Collaborative model is where public agencies directly engages non-state stakeholders in consensus-oriented decision making. And this model focuses on reaching agreement among participants rather than forcing decisions by a majority. And though this takes a bit of time because of the need for consultations, but it remains an important aspect of governance. It is a process and a form of governance in which participants representing different interests are collectively empowered to participate in governance. It emphasizes on agreement rather than relying on majority rule. So that when you talk about collaborative governance, it recognizes the need that there is need for different stakeholders to be brought on board when making decisions and when implementing those decisions. And in doing so, they bring stakeholders for purpose of discussion, for purposes of reaching consensus, so that everybody get along and understand exactly what is going on, rather than in the case of a hierarchical model where top level managers sit, make decisions, and then they impose those decisions on the lower level managers. In this case, therefore, collaborative model demands for the need for stakeholders to sit together, discuss, and until they reach a consensus, so that when they move forward in unison and with a total agreement. There are, of course, strengths and weaknesses of this model. So I want us to start by looking at some of the strengths of the model. One of the most important strengths is that it permits generation of diverse viewpoints and expert knowledge. Collaborative governance produces more effective and innovative solutions. What we mean here is that it is possible for different players to come together. And when different players come together, because of different experiences, once shared, there's a possibility that the kind of decisions that come out of such collaboration is much better than the one that was initially put forward. This is because it is brought to the table, it is discussed, and through that discussion, it is improved. This model also promotes flexibility in management by combining various governance principles. This is because when different players come on board and discuss things, the element of rigidity is highly eliminated because each stakeholder is given a voice, and through their voices, uh, issues are discussed, issues are improved, and consensus that is built makes everybody feel that they are part and parcel of the decision-making process, and therefore they own the decisions that have been made. And once they own it, it is easier for such decisions, therefore, to be implemented successfully. Again, involving stakeholders directly in the process builds trust in government and creates more legitimate, acceptable policies. Sometimes criticism that is leveled on government on the kind of decisions government have made is not that the decisions themselves are bad, but it is because individuals or other stakeholders are not brought on board, and therefore, by not bringing them on board, they develop a sense of trust, rather mistrust, because their concerns they are not given opportunity to express their fears, to express their concerns, and also to contribute to the kind of decisions that are made. On the basis of that, therefore, sometimes mistrust comes in. But we're saying that because collaborative model brings everyone on board, and by individuals or stakeholders giving their views and participating in the kind of decisions that are made, this one helps in building trust. And once trust is built, it also legitimizes the action that the government is going to take because of the approval of various stakeholders. Another important strength is that it permits sharing of resources such as expertise, information, funds, staff, and this leads to more efficient implementation of projects. Because stakeholders have strength in terms of expertise, in terms of resources, in terms of information, and therefore, when one different stakeholders are brought on board, they share their experiences, they share the expertise, they share information, they share funds, they share staffs, and this one helps in ensuring that projects that are being implemented enjoy a wide array of expertise, information, and even support. And through that, such projects stand a very high chance of being implemented successfully. Another important thing that I also want to bring to our discussion on collaborative government is the aspect of the weaknesses. So that what are some of the weaknesses of this model? One of them is that it is quite difficult to locate failures and to apportion certain failures to specific individual or offices or agencies when we use a collaborative model. This is because the fact that stakeholders are brought on board, there's a possibility for decisions that are made if they do not succeed. It is difficult for any individual or agency to be held accountable because each agency will say that, look, we sat down, we agreed, and if there is any failure, then all of us have failed, not any particular individual sector. The other important weakness is that it is difficult to promote cohesion among different governance elements because people come from different sectors, right? Sometimes it becomes difficult because or different approaches. Some have different approaches, some have different procedures. Some have different organizational cultures, and because of this, consensus sometimes is quite difficult to build. Cohesion sometimes is quite difficult to promote. This is because of the diverse backgrounds that individuals come from. Again, collaboration could be time consuming and resource intensive. This might lead to slower, prolonged processes compared to traditional decision making process. In other words, if there are decisions that need to be made on an emergency basis, then collaborative model cannot work. This is because it requires different stakeholders to be brought on board, a discussion made back and forth, and this one might make it difficult for government to address emergencies or matters that require urgent action. Again, I want to mention that sometimes when you have to deal with things that are not directly expressly put in policies, again, collaborative model can be quite difficult because they use policies as guidelines, and anything that is outside the policy, certain stakeholders might insist that they do not be touched because we do not have procedures on how they should be handled. The other important uh, 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 model is what we call participatory model, and this is a framework for decision making and governance that emphasizes the active involvement of citizens in the governance. And this model empowers citizens and non-state actors to directly influence public decision making. The model shifts power to the people, and this allows them to exert control over public resources and services. It also focuses on deepening democratic engagement by empowering citizens in policymaking process. So when you talk about participatory model, we mean engaging different sectors. But unlike the collaborative model, which emphasizes consensus, participatory model emphasizes on majority rule. So it says that people can sit down, discuss issues, but at the end of the day, it is the wishes of the majority that carries the day, so that majority have their way, minority have their say. So this is basically what we mean by participatory model, similar to what happens in parliament or what happens with parliamentary committees coming to seek people's views, and in the process, they subject those views to parliamentary debate. And the group that has numbers in parliament often carries the day. What are some of the strengths of this particular policy? One of them that is it seeks to be inclusive. Because different people are brought on board, it is possible that people might feel included and represented in the kind of decisions that are made. And they might feel that their voices are heard, their perspectives are heard, and also their interests are also felt. And therefore, inclusivity, the aspect of inclusivity, is one of the most important strengths of participatory model. Again, by promoting dialogue and collaboration, mutual respect, participatory governance helps to bridge divides and build stronger and more resilient communities. Because people come together to discuss, people learn, and from learning, they pick the strengths from each other and see what they can do at their own level to strengthen their ability to address issues affecting them. It also encourages the participation of diverse groups, which ensure that decisions are accountable and transparent, and which can help combat what we call democracy deficits. So we are saying that when you bring different people together, again, it helps in promoting transparency and accountability, because you have to lay bare the issues that are being discussed to be subjected to public participation, to be subjected, and every stage is monitored so that any failure, once detected, then particular office where it has occurred can be held accountable. Again, direct participation increases confidence in institutions and builds trust between citizens and state officials. If well implemented, participatory model can actually be the best. But it also has certain weaknesses. One, the process requires extensive deliberations, consultations, voting, and this means, therefore, it's a slow process. Because it's a slow process, it's not suitable for addressing emergencies. It's also important to realize that, or to notice that, even though participatory is built on the idea that different people are brought on board, sometimes different interests and resourceability might make certain sectors more powerful and more influential than the other areas, so that the most powerful and influential stakeholders, they are likely to have their views understood and their views carrying the day, so that there could be an element of illusion of participation where you go to participate, but you lack powers to push decisions to your favor because you lack resources, you lack political goodwill, and probably you lack what we call connection power. In that case, therefore, those that have better resources, better connection power, will have their views brought on board and their agenda considered at the expense of those other groups. So it can also lead to marginalization. Again, there's a risk that the majority can trample on the rights of individuals or minorities if guardrails are not in place. I think I've also explained this. But it's also important to notice that sometimes government engage in participatory model merely to be seen as acting in public interest when in actual sense they are not. This is because they might bring issues to the public for discussion, but at the end of the day, they disregard all public views and still implement what they had actually intended to do. In other words, they simply bring the idea to the public to be seen to be engaging the public. But in actual sense, decisions are already made, and the public is merely meant to rubber stamp government decisions. So sometimes it's a good thing. Then we have the corporate model, and corporate model is based on the corporate or the private sector, the issues that emphasizes the need for credentials, the need for merit, that those who hold offices should have the qualifications, should have the experience, and they should have the credentials that go with particular roles and responsibilities of certain offices. So when you talk of corporate model, the emphasis here is, can we run a public sector using the philosophies and approaches that the corporate sector or the private sector uses? So if we can do that, then it has also certain advantages and disadvantages. So when you talk of corporate model, it is basically asking public agencies to embrace work philosophies, work procedures, and work principles that are modeled along the private sector, and to ensure that they do what private sectors does. It has strengths. It also has certain weaknesses. One of the strengths is that the model leverages on citizens' knowledge and experience to support strategic decisions and policy implementations. Again, its emphasis on credentialism and meritocracy can help in building trust among citizens as well as investors. Most importantly is that it increases stakeholders' confidence and attracts investment by ensuring ethical leadership and compliance with regulations. Lastly, states with strong governance are seen as less risky, allowing them to attract investors more easily and secure funds at a much lower cost. What are the weaknesses? One of the weaknesses is that there is a potential for information asymmetry if communications channels are weak, and this might result in other stakeholders not being involved fully in governance. Again, implementing compliance systems, auditing, and hiring independent directors can be quite expensive. This is important because of the fact that corporate model suggests that we need to employ people with credentials, people with qualifications, and obviously people with qualifications, they require higher pay. And because of this, they're saying that sometimes it can be expensive, especially for public sector agencies. Again, citizens may struggle to influence the government due to lack of adequate avenues for citizens' participation. Lastly, accountability issues may arise due to the fact that officials tend to feel accountable to the appointing authority rather than to the citizens. Up to that point, I want to say thank you so much for listening. Kindly take note of any issue that is not clear and then raise it so that we can look at it at appropriate time. Thank you so much.